We have breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ, where the Seattle Mariners are moving on from manager Scott Servais as early as today. That has been confirmed by our MLB insider Jim Bowden. Also adding that Dan Wilson is expected to take over as interim manager. Now, the Mariners led the American League West by as many as 10 games back in June. But, man, it's been a steep slide ever since then. The M's are idle today, but they'll begin their three-game set with the Giants on Friday, trailing Houston by 5 games in the division. They're also 7.5 games out of that final wild card spot in the AL. And let's welcome in Jim Bowden here to talk about this news. And Jim, if I'm rewinding in my head back to the trade deadline, we had a conversation about, hey, what team needs to make some moves and get things right, or their manager is going to be on the hot seat. And you said the Mariners. So really not shocking to you that this move is being made.
Yeah, it's not shocking. I mean, look, the Seattle Mariners have had a difficult run here. Scott Servais has been there 9 years. They've made it to the postseason only once. And Seattle has the best starting rotation in the American League, 1-5. And it's really not even debatable. And so to be out of the playoffs where they are right now is just not acceptable. They're 5 games behind Houston in the division. They're 7.5 out, as you mentioned, into the wild card. And when this team went 1-8 on this road trip, that was the last straw. And the front office, led by Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander, have been very clear that they believe that this team's offense is better than what they've shown. And every time they make a move and they bring in a bat, whether it's Jorge Polanco or Randy Arozarena, everyone seems to go backwards. And they tried changing hitting coaches earlier in the year, and that didn't work. And I think Jerry Dipoto and Justin looked at this and said, hey, if we don't make a managerial change and turn this thing around, we may lose our jobs at the end of the year. And so they're really hoping a change in managers, a new voice coming in is going to make a difference. Now, the one thing that you didn't mention there that's extremely important is that Dan Wilson, who is going to be the new interim manager, they've also convinced Edgar Martinez, the Hall of Famer, to go down in the dugout and coach for the rest of the year. Now, remember Edgar Martinez, one of the greatest hitters of his time, certainly one of the best hitters in Seattle Mariner history. And they really believe that Martinez in that dugout can really help turn around some of these hitters, because this is a team over the last 6 weeks of the season has a chance to make a run. They're not too far back. There's enough time for them with 34 games left to be able to catch Houston and maybe even the wild card. So they looked at the timing. They knew something dramatic had to be done. They've made that decision.
And Jim, you mentioned it. Dan Wilson, I know that is someone you're very, very familiar with. So take us through your experience with him, and then to piggyback off of Edgar Martinez, what can they do together to turn things around? Or is it maybe too late? I know you said there's a chance, but first, kick us off with Dan Wilson, your experience with him, and what do you think he's going to do day one there as the interim manager?
Jacqueline, I love this decision to hire Dan Wilson. Really smart guy, communicates well. He's a true leader, and I really think he's going to make a great Major League manager. Remember, I said the same thing about Aaron Boone and Alex Cora and Stephen Vogt, and I just think this is a great hire by Jerry Dipoto here. In 1990, when we won a World Series with the Cincinnati Reds, we drafted Dan Wilson with our first-round pick. 3 years later, I traded him to the Seattle Mariners for Brett Boone and Eric Hansen. So certainly I've had a relationship with Dan, known him for a long, long time, and I love his baseball wisdom and leadership. So I think he's going to do really well with this club. It's certainly going to be a much different tone, a much different approach, and I think that is something the Seattle team needed. I really do. So look, it's a tough day. I was a GM. I fired many, many managers. I made a lot of changes. It's a difficult day when these kind of decisions have to happen, but this is big business, and there's big expectations. And it's very rare to have the kind of starting pitching Seattle has and not make the playoffs. This is the kind of rotation we dream about. And if Seattle gets in the playoffs, because of the short series, they've got the pitching to run the table. And so they've got to get these bats going. You can't make any more trades the rest of the way. So the only thing you can do to try to turn the tide is to make a managerial change. So I like the call right here by the front office in Seattle. I think it was long overdue.
Yeah, you mentioned how rare it is to have that kind of starting pitching rotation. It feels like with the Dodgers, with the Braves. Once it gets to the postseason, we're always saying if their starting rotation was healthier, they could go that much further. But also, I want to talk about your experience in the front office. Again, you mentioned you had to go through firings and go through this kind of thing. And I know you mentioned saying, hey, maybe a new voice is going to change things around. But really, how much responsibility for the Mariners and their failure can you put on the manager?
Well, I think anytime you're losing and underachieving, there's enough blame to go around, right? I mean, I'm sure Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander are taking blame in the front office. I mean, they have a lineup that has more strikeouts than any team in baseball. That's unacceptable. That's not necessarily a reflection of the manager. Obviously, you can blame the players that aren't producing, of course. You can blame the scouting department, the analytics department. There's enough blame to go around. But at the end of the day, you can't fire 26 players. And if you're running a team, you're not going to fire yourself when you have a choice to make a change down there. So, look, these decisions, if you're going to make them in season, you got to understand that now you got to win. You got to win more games with the new manager. You shouldn't make this change. You know, you look at Brian Cashman, the general manager of the Yankees. He has never in his entire career made an in-season change of a big league manager. And the only times I ever did it in my 16-year career is when I felt my team was underachieving to the level that if I made a change, I knew the next guy coming in would win more games than the guy I'm firing. If it doesn't play out that way, then you know what? Then look in the mirror, then it's your fault. So I think Jerry and Justin looked at this thing and said, hey, we may lose our jobs if we don't make this change. So let's bring in a new voice, see if they can't get these bats going, see if we can't find a way to get back into the playoffs.
Jim, we certainly appreciate it. If you're just joining us here on HQ, we're following that breaking news. The Mariners moving on from manager Scott Servais. Thanks so much, Jim. We appreciate it, and it's just been a downhill slide for the Mariners. If you go back to June 18th, they led the AL West by 10 games. And you see the record there, 44 and 31 first in the division. Since then, 20 and 33, a massive slide there. They're starting a 3-game set with the Giants on Friday. Currently trail Houston by 5 in the division and 7.5 games out of that final wild card spot.